Welcome to this family documentary about Samuel Adler. To most of us in the family, he is remembered as Uncle Sam. He lived from 1902 to 1988. And those of us who remember Uncle Sam share something in common: precious recollections of a good man who led a great life and was an incredible role model. Even though it has been several decades since he passed, his positive spirit continues to inspire us and sets a standard for living that is unparalleled among men today. I hope that just a little bit of that spirit can be conveyed to the younger generations of our family in this portrait of Sam Adler. In today's video, we will cover part 1, Sam's parents and the Adler farm. This is what I call a descendants tree. This shows all the descendants of Simon and Olga Adler, who are pictured at the top. Simon and Olga had 6 children that survived: Isidore, Harry, Estelle, Sam in the middle here, who will be the focus of our documentary, and Beatrice and Gertrude. And then Harry had Sandy, Estelle had Stanley, Sam had Doris, and Gert had Barry. And then we see the other ensuing generations down at the bottom of the page. So everybody pictured here is a direct blood descendant of Simon and Olga. And so now let's take a look at Simon and Olga. Simon, whose actual name is Samuel A. Adler, was born in 1872 in Russia, but is likely now what is called Ukraine. His parents died in a fire in the clothing factory that they owned in Kiev, and that prompted Simon to leave Ukraine and immigrate to the United States with his cousin when he was just 15 years old in 1887. We don't know much about Simon's early years, but we do know from family history that he had blouse factories in New York and Jersey City in the early 1900s. Another thing that's been very interesting in the research here is that although the family only ever knew of him as Simon, we now know from various documents that his legal name was in fact Samuel A. Adler. This is not the Uncle Sam that I'm focusing on, but this is Uncle Sam's father, Simon, whose official name was actually Samuel. And here, my cousin Sandy, who is Simon's granddaughter, she's going to tell a very interesting story about this particular silver dollar that is pictured right here.
My father gave me a silver dollar with the year 1887 on it. And he said, my father gave this to me because this is the year he immigrated into the United States. And I have that silver dollar. I carried it with me all the time. It's always with me, yeah. I've had it in my wallet for probably 50 years.
And this is Sam's mother, Olga Melnick Adler, Melnick being her maiden name. She was born in Russia in 1876. We don't know what part of Russia, but likely Ukraine. She immigrated to the USA in 1887, and she married Simon in 1894. We know she had 8 children, but only 6 of them survived childhood. We do not know anything about the 2 non-surviving children. And if you recall from the descendants tree, her children were in order: Isidore, born in 1895, and then Harry, Estelle, Sam, Beatrice, and Gertrude. Here, Sandy tells a story where she remembers her grandmother when Sandy was a little child.
I do remember one Hanukkah. Your father and I were out at the farm with everybody. We were standing by the steps in the hallway going up to the second floor, and Grandma came up to us, and she was always pinching my cheeks, saying, your cheeks have to be rosy, your cheeks have to be rosy. And then she said, okay, Kinder, here's 50 cents for you, Stanley, and 50 cents for you, Sandra. It's your Hanukkah gelt.
Now we'll focus on the Adler farm. So the earliest indications that there was a farm on the spot where the Adlers eventually had their farm is here in the newspaper, the New Brunswick Daily Home News in 1904, where we see a Franklin Park farm being sold to a Lewis and William Mabus. So we know that this is what eventually became the Adler farm. We know that because here in 1907, specifically on April 15th, 1907, the Daily Home News in New Brunswick reported that Simon, here listed as A.S. Adler, bought the farm from Lewis and William Mabus for $11,800, and he intended to come live and work on the property. So we know that Simon purchased the farm in 1907. And here we see a few months later, Simon has placed a help wanted ad in the Daily Home News. He's looking for people to help him build things on the farm. And this is the farmhouse. We don't know exactly when the house was built, but this is the farmhouse that Stanley and Sandy remember visiting in the 1930s and 40s. And here, Stanley is going to describe his recollections of the inside of the old farmhouse.
It was an awesome house. You went in the front door. To the left was the ping pong. There was a big ping pong table and a piano. Remember, Gertrude was outstanding ping pong player. Every ball she hit was a slam. And the right was a living room, and further back was the dining room. All these rooms were very long. Then they had the second kitchen. And the kitchen, and after that was another kitchen. And to right of that was a whole room just for storage. The second floor had 7 bedrooms on the second floor. In front of it was a passageway. You open the door, you go out on a porch. And then there was a third floor where when they had hired help.
And Stanley will also describe the farm layout and the extensive property.
Summers, a lot of times I stayed there for a while. The farm was set back from the highway, maybe 300-400 feet, dirt road to get there. Then the giant lawn out front, and we had croquet, and if there's any other lawn games, we had that also. Outside the house on the left side, the dog house, and we had this dog, I guess, named Grover, a big dog. Right on the right side of the house, they had a vegetable garden, maybe half the size of a football field, gigantic. They had a cornfield. We used to go play cornfield, hide and seek. The maze, it was like a maze. The farm was just overpowering. But behind the house must have been 6-7 chicken coops connected. I used to go in there to collect the eggs, then they'd fly all over the place. The beginning was scary. You go out to the barn. I had a BB gun, try and shoot pigeons. But out past the barn and the brook was all open land, and that's where the cows did their grazing and everything. In the far back, very, very, very large wooded area.
And then Stanley will talk about how they actually had so much land they go hunting on the farm.
In Sam's room, the closet, maybe 7-8 rifles. The farm was big enough. They used to go hunting on the farm. It was hundreds of acres. A lot of it was unused.
And now Sandy will describe her recollections of the old farmhouse.
Sam and Isidore shared a room, but it was a huge room. And in the middle, I guess Grandma, she had a sewing machine, one of those pedal sewing machines. She had made a big curtain, and they were separated by a big curtain in this great big bedroom. And my father had a tiny bedroom. And then there were 2 bedrooms in the front of the house that the 3 girls shared, Estelle, Gertrude, and Beatrice. And then there was our grandmother's room and the bathroom. And then inside the house, when you walk straight to the back of the house, there was a huge walk-in closet. And they kept coats and everything there, and also rifles and ammunition. And I don't think anybody ever told Stanley and me not to touch it. And Sam, they all used to go hunting on the farm. They hunted for pheasant and whatever else was out there. We never, ever, ever touched those guns or those bullets. And they were right out there in the open.
And then Sandy will describe a little bit more about the farmhouse and the creamery.
The farm had two kitchens. One, of course, where she cooked, and there was a potbelly stove there. And the second kitchen was where she weighed the eggs and put them in the boxes. That basically was a working kitchen. And also in the farm, down in the cellar, it was a dirt floor. Now, your father said he went up to the third floor. I know I was always afraid to go up those steps, but he went up to the third floor, and he said that's where all the workers must have slept when they, when they had workers on the farm. We had an outhouse, and next to the outhouse was a huge cherry tree, which my father built a swing in for me to go swinging on it. And they did have indoor plumbing. Yeah, she used to go into the chicken coops. I used to go with her to collect the eggs. Big chicken coops. I mean, there were thousands of chickens. And then there was a big creamery where they made the cream and the milk. And I know my father used to take the milk and cheese into Philadelphia. That's where they sold it.
So all 6 of the Adler children, they lived and labored on the farm well into adulthood, and they were a very close and hardworking family. Sandy will describe the closeness of the family.
A very smart family. They loved each other. There was never any jealousy anywhere. Very close knit, and they did anything for each other.
Growing up in a rural area on a farm, Sam and his siblings never had a Hebrew education, but they did have a strong Jewish identity. Here, Sandy describes the children's education.
My uncle Isidore and my father each left school in the 8th grade, after the 8th grade, and they worked on the farm. I think from Estelle on down, they all went through high school. And of course, Uncle Sam went to law school. They never had a Hebrew education. None of them were bar mitzvahed except Uncle Sam when he was middle age, and older.
Now, we know Simon was employing state-of-the-art dairy methods as early as 1908, as evidenced by this article that appeared in the Daily Home News in October 9th, 1908, in which it talks about how a man is using new silos and new techniques, up-to-date cutting machines to fill Sam Adler's silos at Franklin Park. Now, Simon was proud to be an American, and he held big family picnics in the summers, and particularly on July 4th, he would invite townspeople to come out to the farm. Sandy will describe some of this here for us.
He was so proud of the fact that he entered this country. He passed the Statue of Liberty on July 4th, 1887. He was so proud of that fact that when he bought the farm, it had a cupola on the top, and he put a big bell in there. And every 4th of July, he would ring that bell for the townspeople to come out to the farm for a picnic. He was that proud of being in the United States, in this country. And I remember having picnics at the farm.
And now Sandy will describe some of the family picnics.
We had big picnics out at the farm, and we had a big family out of New York and a smaller family out of Philadelphia. and they all came out. It was amazing. Crowds of people. And in the house, there was a playroom. They had a standard size ping pong table, a player piano, and a Victrola that you had to wind up. And we had people all over. It was amazing. We had a lot of fun. Uncle Sam had his buddies from New York and family from New York, the Melnick family, which was my grandmother's side of the family. They played badminton. They played all kinds of games outside and inside. They used to have tournaments, the younger cousins with each other, ping pong. I used to marvel at this one cousin. He used to serve from under the table. Fast. I mean, he was so fast.
And now Stanley will provide his recollections of gatherings at the farm.
On the Sundays, especially the Sundays in the summer, the relatives, I mean, there was always 15, 20 people. All the relatives from New York came, where we came, and locals came. But there was a big gathering on Sundays at the farm. The summers, almost every Sunday, there were guests coming, family, friends.
So they worked and lived on the farm. Here we see in the 1910 census, it shows Simon as a farmer. Here he's listed as Samuel A. Adler. That's Simon. He's listed here as a farmer with his wife Olga and 5 children. 5 children because Gert was born in 1911. She's not born yet. And what's interesting here, this is the first we ever found out about this, is Olga is listed here as having 7 children born, only 5 living. So we know the 2 children died. Our speculation is that they probably were between Estelle, who is listed here as Esther. By the way, Aaron here is really Harry. We don't know why they're listed as Aaron and Esther, but this is Harry and Estelle. But between Estelle and Sam, we see a 5-year age gap. So it's likely that there were 2 children born in that gap that did not survive. We do not know anything about them. Now, Simon begins to expand his business. In 1914, we see this Home News article in which Simon has opened a dairy store at 202 Nielsen Street in New Brunswick to sell dairy products from the farm. And shortly after that, we see many advertisements in the Daily Home News in 1914 that look like this one, promoting the Adler Farm dairy products at their retail store in New Brunswick. These ads ran very frequently in the latter half of 1914 and into 1915. Here is another ad in late 1914 using some innovative marketing techniques. Simon showing off his innovation prowess here. He's using S&H green stamps in the store to help stimulate sales. And then something the family knows nothing about today, in November 1914, Simon expands again and he opens a delicatessen with table service at 339 George Street in New Brunswick. And if we look at the Home News in late 1914 and 1915, we will see many ads for the delicatessen. Nobody in the family had ever heard of this delicatessen, but further research shows that it looks like Simon sold the delicatessen around 1916, because here we see a grand opening of a Seidman's or Seidman's delicatessen at the exact same location at 339 George Street. And this appears in the October 14th, 1916 Home News. So it's very likely that Simon started the deli and then sold it to Seidman's in 1916. Now, by 1916, Simon is not just a successful farmer, he's a very successful businessman with a strong reputation in New Brunswick. We see here an article that runs in the Daily Home News in which they say that Simon is particularly well known in New Brunswick because he supplies a large part of the residents of New Brunswick with milk and other dairy products. Later on, it says that Simon has built up a high reputation. And this is evidenced by a front page article in the Daily Home News on February 8th, 1916, in which grand business plans are introduced by a new company, Adler Realty, of which Samuel A. Adler, Simon, is the president of this new company. The article goes on to describe various plans, including a clothing factory that will be erected on the site of the Adler farm, a bus service that will start from New Brunswick to Franklin Park, where the farm exists, innovative plans for residential lots for people to come live so they can work in the factory and live right next to the factory, and some signs of early success, because we're seeing that some of the lots are already being sold. And Sandy recalls seeing a couple of the houses that had been built.
And I remember seeing two houses somewhere away from the farmhouse. And I am almost positive that when your grandmother and when Aunt Estelle and Uncle Jules got married, that was the first house they ever lived in.
And we see here in this January 21st, 1916 article, the incorporation notice of the Adler Realty Company with Simon as president of the company. Here is an ad that appeared very frequently in 1916 for the Adler Realty bus line, again, going from back and forth from New Brunswick to Franklin Park. And here is a follow-up article to that front page article from February 1916. This is on June 2nd, 1916. It's talking about the progress at the factory and the fact that that some of the factory is construction is underway. The article says that by August they expect the factory to be completed, and it also mentions that the homes have been started, and they also expect 24 one-family homes to be completed around August 1916. Now, here's a funny little story that appeared in the Daily Home News on March 17th, 1916, involving a horse that was scared by an automobile that was operated by the Adlers here. And I'll just pause for a minute for anybody who wants to read the article. So the horse was scared by the automobile from the Adler Dairy Company as it sped past the horse. Now, we know that the Adlers lived out on a farm. They didn't have opportunities to have a Hebrew education or attend synagogue, but we do know that Simon maintained a strong Jewish identity. Here we see in 1918 that he was the president of the Middlesex County Jewish Farmers Association. And here in early 1919, we see an ad that Simon ran where he's renting a 5-room bungalow. So what we can only assume is perhaps this is one of the houses that was built in 1916, and now they're renting it out. In the family history, we knew of these plans to build a factory and homes, but we never knew that these things were actually built. And so we had no recollection of this or in the family lore. It's only as we're seeing some of these articles that we see some of this actually came to fruition. And then very sadly, Simon's life was cut short. He died in the flu pandemic of 1919. And this is his obituary that appeared in the Daily Home News on December 16th, 1919. And we don't know what happened to some of these businesses. As I mentioned, in family history, we knew he had a lot of plans. We didn't know he actually was able to follow through with some of these plans. So here Sandy conjectures what happened to some of the businesses.
What happened was the epidemic in 1919, 1918. That's what happened.
Your grandfather dies and then some of this stuff just gets shut down.
Absolutely.
Now, when Simon dies, Olga takes over and keeps the family intact and keeps the farm going. Here, Doris is going to talk about how close the family was.
Loved his brothers and sisters. They were all so close. It was a marvel of a family that everyone loved each other and respected each other, and how they respected their mother. And I guess his father died when he was about 16. And he said he never really saw that much of his father because he was always on the go. The mother held the family together, and they kind of did what she told him to.
Sandy also describes the respect that all the children had for their mother, Olga.
They were very close to their mother. They listened to her. It was amazing how much respect they had for her.
So we know Olga keeps the farm running. Here's early evidence. This is an ad that appeared for a tractor company in the Sunday, February 1st, 1920 Daily Home News. And here the Adler Dairy Farm is listed as one of their clients. And here we also see in 1920, Olga is running an ad to hire help to help run the farm. And we know it wasn't easy for Olga. Sandy is going to describe here a story she was told about how Olga had to visit a bank to maintain, I guess, funds, lines of credit to keep the farm running.
I remember my father telling me that after Simon died, she went to the bank and she spoke to them, and she did not speak English really well. And yet she went to a bank and to the bank and convinced them to let her continue with the farm. And I don't know whether they were short of money. I have no idea. But I remember my father said, yes, she went and spoke to the bankers, and they respected her. And she made a good case for keeping the farm.
And here in the 1920 census, we see Olga and all the children are living at the farm. Isidore, Harry, Estelle, Sam, Beatrice, and Gertrude. And here's a funny little story about one of the men who was the hired help living at the farm. Again, they always had hired help, and they lived up on the third floor of the farm. So I'll read this. John Gallagher, who has been working on the Adler farm at Franklin Park, was released with the warning to keep away from New Brunswick. He came here to have Christmas dinner at the home of his sister, he said, but indulged too freely in the cup that cheers. And we know that Isidore and Harry, essentially, they took over the management of the farm. Here, Isidore placed an ad in the May 31st, 1939 Home News, where he is actually selling one of his tractors. And here's the 1930 census. So this shows that they are all still living at the farm, and the farm is now valued at $50,000. So we see here Olga, Isidore, Harry, Estelle, Estelle's husband, Julius, Sam, Beatrice, and Gertrude. So here in 1930, all still living on the farm. And here is a picture of several of the family members on the front porch of the farm in the 1930s. This is Olga, B, Sam, Isidore, and here is a family friend. And here Sandy will recall some of her visits to the farm again.
I used to go out there a lot on the bus service that our grandfather started. My father would give me 2 dimes. I would walk down to the bus station, which was across from the railroad station. Bus would come. I'd get up, and I was probably maybe 8 or 9 years old. And he'd say, where to? I say, the Adler farm. I gave him a dime. He'd let me off, and I'd walk up this long, long road that was lined with apple trees.
And here is the 1940 census. And even in 1940, we still see Olga, Isidore, Sam, and Gert are all still living on the farm, along with hired help that's also listed with them in the same residence there. So Olga finally sold the farm in the early 1950s. And in 1958, the new owner found this flyer that's pictured here in the attic of the farmhouse. It was the original plans for the development of the Adler Realty Company and selling of lots and the erection of a factory that will be there on the farm in 1916. So they shared this with the Home News in 1958, and the Home News was so fascinated by it that they ran a big article that we see here on February 13th, 1958, all about the ambitious plans of Simon and the Adler Realty Company. And Sam, my Uncle Sam here, the subject of our documentary, he's quoted in the article saying it was Dad's primary plan to get poor people from the slums of Philadelphia and New York out in the country. It was mostly a humanitarian project. Dad wanted to better his fellow man. And the article here indicates that the plans were brought to an abrupt halt by the entry of the United States into World War I. So this gives us a little further insight into what happened. Why did the plans not come completely to fruition? Now, Sam and Sandy visited the farm one last time in Sam's life together in 1985. And they went to a very special place on the farm. There was a brook in the about a half mile behind the farmhouse through the woods, and it was a very pretty area, very special place. So they went to find the brook. Here's a picture of the brook from a historical society. This picture shows a young girl on the brook in 1940, and here is Sandy and Sam on their quest to find the brook in a visit to the farm in 1985. First, we're going to hear from Stanley. He's going to describe the brook on the property.
From the house, it was at least a quarter of a mile away, maybe a little further, maybe a half a mile, the far side of the property.
And now Sandy will tell the story of finding the brook with Sam.
I sent you that picture of Uncle Sam and me where we found the brook in 1985. Uncle Sam and I said, let's go see if we can find the brook. Let's go to the farm. I wanted to show Bill the farm, and I always wanted to go to the farm whenever I visited. So we went out. We found, of course, the farm. It doesn't look anything like it did. But Sam and I and Bill decided to walk through the grass and the whatever was out there to find the brook. We were walking and walking. We weren't quite sure exactly where it was, but we walked and walked and walked through high grass, through low grass. We were just getting tired. We were about to give up. Bill said, wait a minute, I think I hear something. And we walked a little further and there was the brook. We both almost cried, Uncle Sam and I. We just stopped and we hugged each other. And he looked at me and he said, girl, we found it. Girl, we found the brook, girl. And he said, you know, somewhere around here, my Indian friend and I, when we were kids, we buried a treasure. But he said, I don't remember where it was. But, you know, at that time, Lenny, I looked it up. There were quite a few Indians in that area. And he had a friend who, when he was a child, an Indian, and they buried something at the brook. He said, we buried a treasure.
In 2018, my parents, Arlene and Stanley, visited the farmhouse again. This is the actual house. It's been sold probably several times. It's been completely redone. And the farmhouse is actually can be found just west of Route 27 in Franklin Park, off of Delar Parkway. Here my dad describes directions to the park.
Highway 27, Franklin Park, on the west side, from the main intersection, Henderson Road on Route 27. It was probably a mile down the road. Going south another mile or so on the west side was where the Highway 27, Frank.
And if you look on Google Maps, you can actually see the Adler farmhouse. This is in 2022, satellite picture of the farmhouse, and you can if you use this link, you can actually see it yourself. And here's a scaling back. This blue circle is the house right here, and almost everything we see here would have been the Adler farm property. We know the farm property would have extended well beyond what is today Delar Park. So we don't know the exact limitations of it, but it's approximately what you're seeing here would be the farm property. And here is so here's Route 27 down here, so you can see how far the farmhouse was set back. Originally back in the 1910s and 20s, this would have been a dirt road, and in the 30s and 40s, as Sandy had described it earlier, leading up from 27 to the house. Well, that concludes today's part 1 session. Coming soon will be part 2, the early life of Sam Adler. And thank you very much for watching. And anybody who wants more information about this video or would like to provide some comments, please feel free to contact me. You can see my contact information there. And I look forward to sharing part 2 with you very soon.